Sup guys? I've been playing around a bit in Chapter 15 Safe, trying to get Houston 2, and in this video I'm going to be sharing some of my findings with you. I haven't actually gotten Houston 2 myself though, so carefully consider if you want to receive advice from a noob such as myself. The primary goal here is to build a fleet capable of full autoing the stage consistently on Safe for Houston 2, meaning you'll have to have gotten past Chapter 14. So I'm going to be assuming that you have some knowledge about the game, so I will not explain in detail things that have no direct relation with the Chapter 15-4. If you're not quite ready for the things in this video, you're free to watch the rest, but if you ask something like, who is the bottom left ship at 2 minutes and 18 seconds, or how do I get Hedgehog? It's probably a good sign that you should be doing a little research elsewhere before watching this video. To kick things off, I'll introduce a fleet that worked without any fleet tech or cats, but just raise your fleet tech and cats to make things easier for yourself. There will be editing in this video, so I'll also upload the raw unedited version of the run if you want to watch it in its entirety. I don't know if the fleet is optimal, but the equipment certainly isn't, as I'm still using plenty of plus 10 equipment, especially on the carriers. First, let's take a look at the mob fleet, starting with Shimanto. She's the AA carry, and I particularly like running her because she is also one of the only ships that can remove burns from your fleet, as burns can be a huge problem if you're unlucky. The loadout is pretty conventional, and I recommend using sextuple bowforce on your AA carry if you're not swimming in rainbow AA guns. Then use rainbow AAs or other accelerators on your other ships. If you have enough rainbow AAs to go around, it's completely fine on her as well. I think it's not a bad idea to spend your AA plates to upgrade the rainbow AAs to plus 13, as the 3% upside bonus from upgrading AA guns such as Stags or 134s probably won't make or break your Arbiter clears, and are only really useful for doing runs with meme fleets, while upgrading your rainbow AA actually provides a significant boost in AA performance. The next ship is Unzen. She's probably not the first ship that comes to everyone's mind when you think Chapter 15, but I believe that she is one of the best options. Firstly, her damage against medium and heavy is absolutely insane when she can hit all her torps, likely the highest damage in the game as far as vanguards go. The biggest challenge I noticed from my runs was the inability to dispose of high priority threats in time, thus allowing them to get off multiple cycles of attacks. What I'm specifically referring to are the likes of the Congo class battlecruisers in 3-star battleship fleets, and Hio and Junyo in 3-star carrier fleets. When the battlecruisers unload on your main fleet, or Hio and Junyo send out huge swarms of planes, no matter how tanky your fleet is, you will take some damage. Most decent fleets can recover from one of these attacks, but if the aforementioned enemies stay alive to get off 2 of those attacks, the damage starts racking up very quickly. This gets extremely dangerous, especially in the out of ammo fight that you have to do for auto clear, and the only way to prevent it from happening is not to try to make your fleet even tankier by sacrificing damage, as it's impossible to out-tank all of the damage coming your way, but rather make sure that your damage is high and consistent enough that you don't run into that situation in the first place. Back to Unzen. I used this full Rainbow plus 13 loadout just as a bit of a meme, and it's not necessary, much less a priority. I think it should still be fine if you just use plus 10 torpedoes, or use other torpedoes that you have at plus 13 with plus 10 Oxy Torps, and a plus 10 AA gun that doesn't necessarily have to be the Rainbow one either. The mob fights have many enemies, with the big threats all being medium and heavy armor, so Hindenburg gun is by far the best option, but the other 2 Rainbow guns can work as replacements if you still don't have one. I am also using the Quint 610 Torps because there are just so many enemies that it ends up having a decent hit rate, in which case they are by far the strongest torpedoes against medium and heavy armor threats. They also desync nicely from the other torpedoes being used. As for why I'm using Oxytorps instead of defensive auxiliaries like Rudder, the only threat to your Vanguard is if you can't kill the enemies fast enough and your Vanguard starts ramming into things. I tried dropping 1 Oxytorp for a Rudder, but there was a noticeable drop in consistency when it came to killing enemies in time. Since Unzen has very high stats except for her Torp stat, each Oxytorp is a significant increase to her damage. With the addition of Fleet Tech and Cats, you may be able to use defensive auxiliaries instead if, for some reason, you have a personal bias against Oxytorps. The final Vanguard is of course going to be Laffy too. She just doesn't die and has good enough anti-submarine for the role. You ideally want to put a Rainbow AA on her, and I like using the Elite Damage Control protocol to satisfy her USS equipment requirement. As for the torpedoes, these are the strongest after the Rainbow Quint 610s if they hit. And again, with all the high HP enemies on screen, they pretty much always hit. And they also desync from the other 2 torpedoes I'm running as well. It's not important to upgrade her gun to plus 13, but I would definitely recommend doing so for the Hedgehog and maybe the torpedoes. But you can experiment with other torpedo mounts as well. Now, we move on to the main fleet of the mob fleet. The main fleet hasn't changed from when I was clearing the stage on Lethal, or from my farming setup back in chapter 14, as it's probably the most consistent main fleet combo available right now. The only thing that has changed is that Unicorn's purple anti-submarine plane has now been replaced with the event gold one. I used the bow augment on all my carriers so that they get a permanent 20 aviation bonus for every fight. And just as I say that, it seems that I forgot to give Aquila a bow, so definitely not fully optimized. Aquila again is running the same fighter loadout as always. Personally, I only spend my gold plane plates on single target focused planes, as well as Tenrai, because I make videos clearing hard bosses with for fun fleets, so I need to squeeze out all the damage I can get. If you don't have such a need, then maybe you could consider upgrading a few pancakes to plus 13 for a more comfortable chapter 15 experience, once you have enough bossing planes to do whatever it is that you need to get done. As you can see, I'm not rocking any plus 13 pancakes at this point, so I can't really attest to how much it would help, but they are currently the best fighter in chapter 15 by a wide margin. Across my 2 fleets, I have 6 of them equipped, and then 6 more in the support fleet. I wouldn't recommend upgrading Wyverns however due to the cost, as you could upgrade 3 pancakes, each with better interception capability on their own, for the price of 1 Wyvern. The final ship is, of course, Musashi, who is the only ship capable of removing all possibility of your other 2 main fleet ships randomly dying. Due to her barrage, she doesn't have a choice of using another gun. High performance fire control is used to help her better desync from the carriers, but otherwise it's a pretty standard loadout. While this main fleet is extremely durable and consistent, the ships themselves other than Musashi are lacking in damage, and the fact that all the planes and guns they're using are only plus 10 further exacerbates that issue, hence the need for a lot of damage coming from the Vanguard. If you're still doubting the Unzen pick, just wait until you see her outdamaging Musashi in the fights. Now, let's move on to the boss fleet. Starting with Plymouth, she's using a pretty standard loadout. In fact, I don't think I even bothered changing anything from her Operation Siren / Meta Fight loadout. What she brings to the fleet is the utmost consistency, both in terms of damage and survivability. Next up is Hindenburg. The reason I'm using such a damage-focused Vanguard where one might assume that surviving is the priority is because the main fleet is set up in such a way that the Vanguard by itself is what reaches the boss. For equipment, just use your best heavy cruiser guns on her. To round out the Vanguard, I am using Guam as the tank, and to provide AA as well. I feel like she's not the best tank here in terms of survivability, because torpedo from the destroyer bosses are the biggest threats in the stages, hence the torpedo bulge, but her high damage and AA make her one of the best options overall. Another Vanguard that I think could work would be Yatsen Harbin, and then one of either Plymouth or Hindenburg, but you would lose quite a lot of damage in the Vanguard. You would also lose some AA from Guam, but it's not important here because the main fleet provides enough. Moving on to the main fleet, I chose to go with Yorktown 2. She provides very good interception as well as damage against medium and heavy. If timed properly, she can strike while the enemy smokescreen is down, so I'm using Skyraider on her to burst the bosses, which are light and medium armor, at the appropriate timing. Moving on, we have Independence. She fulfills many roles at the same time. Firstly, she's buffing all the carriers in both fleets. Secondly, the combination of her Interception and Yorktowns makes it so that you don't necessarily need an AA carry in the Vanguard. Although I am running Guam to make things smoother, if you ran a Yat-Sen plus Harbin Vanguard, you'd probably still have enough AA. She's also the third USS ship in the fleet to satisfy Yorktown's buff requirement. Finally, her low cooldowns help to reach the boss faster. Since her retrofit, she's been a mainstay in all of my campaign boss fleets, including Chapter 14, where there isn't much need for anti-air, and Operation Siren, and she's pulling her weight with all +10 equipment. People think I'm trolling with my tier lists, but I'm 100% serious when I put Independence in whatever the highest tier is called, along with the likes of Unicorn and Shinano. Moving on to the final ship, I am using Bismarck's Way for several reasons. First, while a carrier-only fleet is possible, having a battleship flagship is preferred for interception. Next, the fights have multiple bosses, so her black hole allows them to be quickly bursted with AoE. Finally, she just does a ton of damage against light and medium armor, and also makes Hindenburg deal even more damage. Okay, now let's watch the clear. Just kidding. I know what you're thinking. What's odd here is the gun, not the choice of Bismarck. What are you doing with that +13 piece of garbage in the hardest stage of the game? First, let me show you what happens in the final boss fight when you use MK7 instead of this Proto MK6. These are from runs with Cats and Fleet Tech, by the way, because I don't know if the MK7 could even clear without the bonuses. The first shot fires at the 2-minute 39-second mark before the boss spawns. It's not really needed though, as there are no threats on the screen. The next shot fires at the 2-minute 20-second mark, which is pretty good timing as the smoke screen is down right now. The third shot fires at the 2-minute and 1-second mark, and as you can see, the smoke is in full effect right now, and the shots all go wide, making it so that the entire salvo plus the barrage can't even deal 10 bars of damage. Without Cat or Tech, this would drag on for at least another cycle. But here, we end the fight at the 1-minute 56-second mark. Now, let's see what happens with the Proto MK6. Because of the Admiralty fire control table, the first shot comes only 1 second later than the MK7, but just that 1 second difference makes the last round of shells fall on the boss as it spawns. The next salvo comes slightly later than the MK7, but the Proto MK6 is stronger on a per salvo basis, so it deals enough damage, leading to a comfortable sub 1 minute clear. We saw with the MK7 how the next salvo fires during the smoke, but the next salvo for the Proto MK6, if the boss isn't somehow dead by this one, will fire after the next smoke and deal normal damage as well. As you probably already figured out, the choice of guns here is purely due to the smoke timing. Yorktown's airstrike cooldown is also relatively slow and synced to the Proto MK6 as well, allowing for huge bursts in combination. This setup finishes the fight before the 2-minute mark, even faster than 14-4 boss fights. The faster you finish the fight, the less you have to worry about your vanguard surviving. Normally, I would advocate against sinking your main fleet damage in campaign, but it works here because there are fewer enemies before the boss when compared to Chapter 14, and the powerful vanguard can reach the boss with barely any help from the main fleet. With the fewer enemies as well as lack of battleship shelling, this is actually easier in some ways compared to 14.4. As for the carrier support fleet, I just used 3 carriers with 6 fighters, pancakes on all with gold torpedo bombers and plus 10 catapults. I recommend using pancake over purple fighters because they're useful in actual combat as well, and it's just convenient to have a bunch of them lying around. Hopefully, by now, I've explained all there is to say about my ship and equipment choices, and won't get questions like, why are you using white shell on Bismarck? Now, let me show some interesting parts from the techless catless clear. I didn't put it on auto clear mode so that I could pick the most difficult fights possible to simulate the most unlucky auto clear path. Most good fleets should heal off reconnaissance fleets, so I tried to fight only 3-star carrier and battleship fleets. I ran single line in mobs because the vanguard is in no danger of dying with Laffy as the tank, and I really did need all the damage I could get. The difference between single line formation and double line is 20% firepower and torpedo, which is very significant for a ship like Unzen. The first interesting thing that happened is in the second mob fight, where Unzen absolutely destroys everyone in damage dealt. And she MVPs once again in the 5th fight. In the out of ammo boss fight, a 3-star battleship node, despite the amount of damage that I stuffed in my fleet, the battle still lasted until 1 minute 26 seconds. You can see how it could get real dicey real quick if you just decrease damage by a bit, and the fight drags on even longer. And finally, here is the Proto Mk6 maneuvering around the smoke timings in the boss fight. Before I end the video, I'll leave you with some words of advice. In regards to cats, I prefer the mountain talent over all the others in these late game campaign stages. Although it's not as sexy of a talent as Flame, which can significantly increase your damage against Siren bosses as well as challenge modes, it makes clears much more consistent. I also like Forest, as literally every single stat that it provides is extremely good for the chapter. You probably shouldn't spend a lot of resources hunting for them per se, but if you just happen to get cats that have Mountain and Forest, it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep them around. Flame is naturally still good, but not as good as the defensive talents in my opinion. Additionally, talents such as Soulful Warrior and Ace Pilot are not that good in this stage due to mixed fleets. Since you're only using one battleship in each fleet, all the battleship talents will only affect that one ship out of 6. And for some reason, Ace Pilot and Carrier Commander talents don't work for light carriers, so they will also work for only 1 out of 6 of your ships. Ideally, you want to use fleet-wide talents like Mountain, Flame, Forest, and Destiny. Moving on from cats, I would advise you to only use my fleets as references and not to copy them one-to-one. I've seen many people who attempted to copy my fleets but changed one thing they didn't have without understanding the reason behind it, and it ends up just failing miserably. Try to understand the reasoning behind each of my choices, and make the necessary substitutions based on what you have. Take your time preparing for the stage as it only really drops one unique ship, and it's not going anywhere. Personally, I wiped many times during the making of this video, so don't be afraid to experiment. And finally, I want to reiterate that this isn't the optimal fleet. I don't know if there is one, but this is what worked well for me. Some alternative options you could try are, as I mentioned before, Yatsen and Harbin in the boss fleet, swapping Yorktown and Implacable between the boss and support fleets, using Kearsarge over Bismarck, and so on. One last thing I should mention is that with Tekken Cats, you can bring one random leveling Vanguard in the Mob fleet, replacing Shimanto because you don't really need the AA. Unlike 14.4, you can't bring 2 leveling ships, because there's just not enough damage to clear the nodes in a timely manner. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. I hope you found the video informative, and good luck farming for Houston 2. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.